What happens back? One of Hollywood's most admired actors sits bottomward, with late-night television's most controversial host. Alone to ascertain, he's walked into an ambuscade. The restriction in Studio City was so blubbery, you could cut it with a knife, as Robert De Niro found himself face-to-face with Bill Maher, in what would become one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. This wasn't aloof, another celebrity account gone amiss. This was an adept chic in how claimed vendettas can abort able relationships in absolute time. Before we dive into this incredible adventure, accomplish abiding you. Hit that subscribe button, and let me perceive in the comments what you anticipate actually motivated Maher's behavior. Night, the HBO studios. The interview were active with apprehension, as Robert De Niro fabricated his way through the corridors. Backstage, fresh off announcement, his latest blur, the legendary amateur, had agreed to arise on real time with Bill Maher, assured the usual promotional account architecture he'd grown acclimatized to. Over his decades in the spotlight, little did he apperceive that Maher had added affairs. Actually, Bobby, great to accept you here, Maher said as De Niro entered the blooming allowance, his trademark beam, already suggesting this wouldn't be an archetypal account. Looking forward to our babble tonight. De Niro, always a man of few words, artlessly nodded, and took a bench article about Maher's demeanor. Acquainted off, but the amateur had dealt with difficult interviewers before he ambled. He could handle whatever curveballs came his way. As the show's opening music began to comedy, Maher took his position, abaft his board, while De Niro settled into the bedfellow armchair. The audience was electric alive. They were about to attest him to titans of their respective industries, a point in what they affected would be amusing badinage about Hollywood. An accepted contest, ladies and gentlemen, amuse. Acceptable, the incomparable Robert De Niro, Maher announced as the admirers erupted in applause. De Niro coiled affably, his weathered face assuming aloof, adumbration of the acuteness that had fabricated him famous in films like Taxi Driver and Goodfellas. Bob, acknowledgement for actuality here. Maher began aptitude aback in his armchair, with that accustomed arrogant attitude. So acquaint me, how does it feel to be Hollywood royalty in an industry that's actually lost its way? The catechism bent De Niro off guard. This wasn't the softball opener he'd accepted. Well, Bill, I anticipate the industry has acquired, like everything else. There are challenges, but there's also absurd aptitude advancing up. Maher's eyes lit up with an article that looked dangerously abutting to acerbity acquired. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks added like a complete collapse of aesthetic integrity, but a fresh you'd perceive all about that, wouldn't you? The admirers grew quiet, sensing the about-face in accent. De Niro's damage-controlled jaw anchored about imperceptibly, a warning assurance that anyone who knew the actor would accept accustomed immediately. I'm not abiding. What? You're accepting it, Bill De Niro replied, his articulation advancement. It's calm but accustomed and bend. That suggested Maher was treading on alarming arena. Oh, come on, Bob, let's not comedy amateur here. Maher connected acutely adequate himself. We both perceive why you're actually here tonight. It's not about your little movie, it's about accident ascendancy, isn't it? The accusation afraid in the air, like a challenge. De Niro leaned advanced slightly, his acclaimed acuteness alpha to surface. Accident ascendancy for what exactly? Maher's beam widened absolute, his hand like a poker amateur, who anticipation he held all the aces able-bodied. Let's alpha with your recent comments about adjustment. Acting pretty affluent. Advancing from addition who built his absolute career on assuming to be boxy guys, a back anybody in Hollywood knows. The absolute adventure, the insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut abysmal, while maintaining plausible deniability. De Niro's eyes flashed with article age-old, the kind of attending that had fabricated him believable as Travis Bickle and Jake LaMotta. The real story. De Niro's articulation alone to barely aloft a buzz, but every word carried the weight of almost contained fury. And what adventure would that be, Bill Maher? Maher was acutely acceptable every moment of this battle. Agriculture off the tension he created. Oh, you perceive the usual Hollywood actuality, the gap amid the image and the absoluteness, the boxy guy persona against the absolute actuality behind the cameras. The admirers was now completely bashful, acquainted they were witnessing article aberrant. This wasn't ball anymore. This was personal warfare actuality, conducted under studio lights. De Niro sat aback in his chair, his face an affectation of controlled acerbity. For a moment, it seemed like he ability, erring away from the accomplished affair, appropriate afresh. And there, instead, he did. Article alike, more unsettling, he smiled. You perceive what, Bill? You're actually appropriate about one thing. There is a aberration amid angel and reality in Hollywood. His articulation agitated a dangerous calm that fabricated anybody in the studio. Sit up in booty apprehension. The difference is that some of us actually earned our reputations. The improvement hit its mark, and for the aboriginal time since the account began, Maher's confidence seemed to waver, but he wasn't about to back bottomward now, not with cameras rolling, and his acceptability on the band earned. That's absorbing advancing from someone who spent the aftermost 20 years benumbed on work. He did in the 70s and 80s. Maher fired back, his articulation ascent, hardly acquaint me. Bob Aback, was the aftermost time you actually challenged yourself, as an amateur instead of aloof, assuming up for the paycheck. The attack was abandoned, and claimed crossing lines that are like acclimatized provocators. Usually admired Diro's hands, gripped the accoutrements of his armchair, his knuckles whitening as he candied the full ambit of Maher's advance on his legacy. The blackout that followed Maher's attack was oral. You could about hear the aggregate assimilation of animation from the studio admirers. As they accomplished, they were witnessing article that would be talked about for years to appear. Diro's grip on the armchair accoutrements anchored. And when he assuredly battened, his articulation carried the weight of bristles. Decades in Hollywood. You appetite to allocution about challenging myself. Bill Diro's words came out measured, advised like a master craftsman, selecting absolutely the right tool for the job. Let me acquaint you about challenge. Claiming is spending 6 months learning to comedy saxophone for New York, New York. Claiming is accepting £60 for raging balderdash and a fresh accident. It all again. Challenge is alive, with Stanislavski's own acceptance too.
Understand the adjustment, M.A. approved, to interrupt, but Niro captivated up a duke that commanded blackout with the ascendancy of someone who had allowable account from directors like Scorsese and Coppola. But you wouldn't apperceive annihilation. About that kind of adherence, would you bill your idea of claiming as sitting abaft a desk authoritative bargain shots at bodees who've actually put themselves on the band? The audience was actually captivated now, watching a adept at assignment, as Niro systematically dismantled his host credibility. But Maher wasn't accomplished yet, and his acknowledgement appeared aloof. How deep his acrimony actually ran. Oh please, Maher scoffed, his articulation decrepit with contempt. Spare me the adjustment acting lecture. We all apperceive that's aloof cipher for being difficult to assignment. With how many directors accept you abashed over the years with your alleged preparation, how abounding co-stars except you made miserable because you couldn't separate Robert Niro from Travis Bickle. The accusation was decidedly vicious because it addled at article angelic in Niro's apple, his ability and his professionalism. The actor's face darkened, and for a moment anybody in the flat got a glimpse of why he'd been so acceptable. Arena alarming men on awning abashed directors. Niro's articulation was almost controlled fury. Now, is that what you alarm working with Scorsese 8 times? Is that what you alarm Coppola? Dupe me with the Godfather allotment to Francis. Didn't cast me because I was accessible. Bill, he casting me because I could bear what the role demanded. Marlene advanced analysis. He'd found a assumption account hitting afresh. And what about all the belief we don't hear? What about the tantrums, the ego trips, the prima donna behavior that never makes it into your breath allotment? Interviews, tantrums. Niro, again the chat, like he was tasting. Article absenthe on you, appetite to talk about tantrums. Less allocution about what you did to get this account, Bill. Less allocution about the buzz calls your people fabricated to my body's able. This would be a admiring chat about my assignment. Now it was Maher's about face to look uncomfortable as Niro. Angry, the tables on him, the host's assured beam began to falter as he accomplished his bedfellow was about to betrayal. The behind-scenes manipulation that had led to this moment. I don't apperceive what you anticipate you're implying, Maher said, but his articulation lacked the confidence it had agitated earlier. I'm not implying annihilation. Niro attempt back. I'm cogent. You absolutely what happened. Your producers alleged my aggregation. 3 weeks ago, they said you capitaled to do a career retrospective. Maybe allocution about my new film. Altercate the ability of acting. They specifically promised this wouldn't be an ambuscade account. The admirers was hanging on every chat. Now acumen. They were accepting a attenuate glimpse, a BAFTA curtain of how television actually worked. Maher, confused uncomfortably in his chair, clearly not assured his bedfellow to call out the show's approach, so Anon look, Bob interviews advance. Maher approved to defend himself. Acceptable television sometimes means allurement. The adamantine questions that other bodies won't ask adamantine. Questions Diro's beam was actually devoid of amusement. Adamantine questions would be about the ability, about specific roles, about working with allegorical admiral. What you're accomplishing isn't journalism, Bill. It's character assassination, bearded as entertainment. Maher's face was flushing now, his anxiously complete persona beginning to able beneath the burden of Diro's methodical abolition of his credibility, but instead of abatement down, he angled bottomward on his advance. Character assassination, that's affluent advancing from someone who's fabricated a career out of playing killers. And abyss acquaint me, Bob, how abundant of that black is really acting and how abundant is aloof. Here's a question. Beyond a band that shouldn't have been beyond about accusing one of cinema's greatest actors of being the agitated characters he portrayed. The studio felt bashful, except for the hum of cameras and accessories. Anybody waiting to see how Niro would acknowledge to such a personal advance? Niro stared at Ma, for what acquainted like an E in his face, cycling through affections that would have made for a masterclass in awning, acting under altered affairs. Aback, he finally battened his articulation, agitated a cold fury.